give a moment to connect to our live stream.
Spinning wheel.
Do we have quorum? I can see is it just the four of us?
It is just the four of us. So we're just waiting to connect to our live stream. So presently we have Ainsley, Adrian, Josh, and myself to make up quorum. And I was hoping that we may have been joined by John, Tony, and Gary to join us in progress.
Quorum. I can see the, is it just the four of us?
It is just the four of us. And we're just getting a playback here for a minute for our live stream. So presently we have Ainsley, Adrian, Josh, and myself. We've got quorum.
I think that's
And I
coming
was hoping that
from
we may have
YouTube.
been joined by
Okay. Yeah, just click mute on that, and then it will play in the background.
Okay, there we go. Thank you everybody for your patience. We'll open the evening with a recognition of our Indigenous Peoples and Lands statement. And so tonight we would like to begin by acknowledging the treaty territory of the Anishinaabe, which is defined within the Pre-Confederation Treaty known as the London Township Treaty of 1796. And throughout time, this region has also become the current home to the Haudenosaunee and Lenni-Lenape nations. Next, I would like to ask if there are, for completion and acceptance of the agenda. And so I'll ask board members, were there any errors or omissions to the agenda, or would anybody have new business they'd like to add? None? And so I'm wondering, could I get a motion to accept the agenda? Thank you, Mr. Morgan, seconded by Mr. Corneliuson, and all in favor? Opposed? Passed. Okay. And next I'll ask if there are any members of the board this evening that need to make a disclosure of conflict of interest. Seeing none. Next, I'll ask for a motion for the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting.
Sure.
Mr. Corneliuson, and second, Mr. Morgan, and all in favor to accept the minutes. Thank you. Motion passed. This month, we have no external communications to review, and we have no delegations. And so the next topic on our agenda this evening is a presentation by Mr. Chisholm regarding the CMHC co-investment program. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Does everybody see the presentation?
Yep.
Great.
Good evening. You'll see on your agenda today an item requesting the approval of the CMHC co-investment fund. I wanted to take this opportunity to provide a little background and update on the program and how we've got here and what are some of our high-level objectives in advance of reviewing the agreement and making a decision to move forward, just so that all the board members had a sufficient background. I know we've had updates, but it's nice to sort of remind ourselves of a little bit of what we were planning to do and what we're hoping to accomplish. So reminder first that our mission is to provide and maintain homes in a safe and supportive environment to meet the needs of people we serve in our communities. That is what we are supposed to do as an organization. And we do that because we envision healthy homes and communities in London and Middlesex. And we want to lead by example, and we want to help make a difference and positively impact the lives using housing as the foundation. You know, we do care. I think this investment that we're going for is one way to demonstrate that. And to understand sort of who we are as an organization, the impact we have in the community. Just wanted to remind you that we have 9 family communities and scattered sites with 844 units serving families. We have 9 apartment buildings open to adults for 1,180 units, and we have 6 senior communities with over 1,200 units. That's just in the city of London. For the county of Middlesex, we have 8 communities serving adults, seniors, and families in a mix of low-rise and scattered units. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep that portfolio in a good state. I think we're stuck
On the slideshow somewhere. Oops. One single.
Sorry about that. So investing in our mission. London Middlesex Community Housing and the City of London have been working and collaborating on investments to service our communities and our buildings for just over 2 years. As part of the 2020 multi-year budget process, 4 business cases were approved. First one, adding additional staff, 25 staff to support improved service to tenants and then improve community safety. Increasing investment in a capital repair program to address the capital repair backlog and the infrastructure gap. And started our first funding for the first regeneration of our community housing, Reimagine Southdale. As part of that approval package, there was an approval to participate in the CMHC co-investment funding. And that's the program we want to talk about today. That program is part of the National Housing Strategy, and it's designed, this repair and renew stream is designed to support providers reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions by at least 25%. Make sure that a minimum of the units available in the portfolio meet minimum accessibility standards. Invest in improving accessibility in common areas. And there's a commitment required for all providers to extend affordable housing commitments for the sites for an additional 20 years. So to support this, CMHC is offering a combination of low interest loans and forgivable loans of up to 40% of the funding provided. So, and as part of this investment package, CMHC is asking each provider or service area to invest in their portfolio themselves. So this CMHC investment required the City of London to, for the business case, to invest another $28 million in our portfolio over the same time period. So this program is set to roll out. We need to make our first draw by December 31st, 2021. And we have until December 31st, 2027 to complete this work, just around 6 years. So we've been working closely with the City of London and CMHC to develop an implementation plan. We've been essentially looking at our entire portfolio, looking at the units we have, their state of repair, their energy use, and what the viability they have to achieve the program outcomes of CMHC. At the end of that assessment, we identified 8 apartment buildings and 5 family sites that can form, then can participate in this program. So just over 2,000 units, about 65% of our portfolio. We've completed assessment on each site to identify the key projects. We have assessed all the accessible units in the portfolio to make sure that we can bring them to the CMHC requirements and determine that we can make additional units accessible. We have drafted plans for these units that we're bringing to permit with the City of London. And we've conducted energy modeling for the work we want to do on energy conservation to ensure that we meet the requirements of CMHC. We developed a program, project, and funding plan that is ready for implementation, that will meet the timeline set by CMHC, meet their funding requirements, and serve to improve the communities that we serve. The portfolio that were selected includes 4 seniors buildings that have a total of 947 units, 4 apartment buildings in 3 different communities, and 5 of our family sites, including 2, 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units. So a broad mix of our portfolio. When we're looking at our investments in high rises, we're required to hit a 20% accessibility across all the units, so the 2,000 units. So we will be modifying 30% of the units in the high-rise buildings to meet this accessibility standard. And adult buildings will account for 15% of the total building count. Common areas, each of the buildings, whether that's a common room, if there's a common washroom, or the laundry, will become accessible. We will install energy management systems, which will help us monitor and ensure we get the best return on investment. We were installing VFD programming in our MUAs, or makeup area units, to let us save energy and reduce the fan speed and volume at low peak times, keep the air flowing, but manage your energy piece. And a big piece of the high-rise piece is washer and faucet replacement. Our yearly potential water savings for completing this program is 1.4 million gallons. So reducing the flow of the faucets will have a significant impact on our water usage. In townhome sites, the makeup is a little bit different. It's more difficult to make the units themselves accessible, as they're typically multi-level. So the focus there is on energy conservation. So we'll be replacing out the furnaces. We'll be changing domestic hot water tanks to energy efficient. We're going to be doing door and window replacement on certain sites. And we'll be doing some small energy projects as we do this in each community based on their energy consumption. And the exterior of those townhouse sites will get some hard surface repairs. So some of the sidewalks, pavements, landscaping, and the exterior lighting. So those will become LED. So there'll be, a direct impact on the comfort within the unit, but also the appearance of the community. In addition to these energy and accessibility programs, we have our regular capital spend and some other projects that are happening that will deal with improving the look of the community as well. Now, over the course of this project, we anticipate to spend the full $40 million available. This year, we're really on startup costs and soft costs of about $80,000. And then we'll quickly jump into expenditures ranging from, I guess, around $8 to $11 million over the next 4 years of the program, as we taper down in 2026 and 2027 to, as we taper off the work. So we do have a robust project plan that supports the ability to implement, and we have lots of actions underway to support that. What's the funding impact? It's a reduction in use of energy across all sites. Water reduction forecasted for 1.4 million gallons a year reduced. Improved energy monitoring in our high-rise buildings. Improved accessibility for tenants and applicants on the wait list. It's a 210% increase in the number of accessible units in the apartment buildings. And the accessible units will be the common standard for tenants. So we will reset the accessibility standard to today's standards. If you go to a building that has an accessible unit, it might be an accessible unit built in 1973. Now we'll reset the standards to a universal standard, so we're better able to meet the current needs of tenants and better understand what standards are in each building. Accessibility improvements for all apartment common areas will be an improvement for all tenants. So we do have lots of impact going on there. Next steps for us is just City of London approval is in place, and they're in the process of submitting the documents to CMHC through us. We are requesting board approval of this program today, at today's meeting. We will be working through the final executable documents this week and next with CMHC, and we need to submit documents for CMHC to prepare for first draw. Our first draw, we hope to submit in the first week of December, and then we transition from planning to implementation. And for us, that means getting the permits to do the initial retrofits for the accessible units to ensure the plans will actually work in our buildings, in all our buildings. We have an RFP already out for parts of this project that will be coming back in the next few weeks. And we're preparing to release a few other RFPs to get the initial work in 2021 underway. So we're well suited to get this project moving. There's a lot of work happening on the project, and the team is ready. Wanted to provide that background, and maybe I don't know if it's appropriate to provide an opportunity for questions before we sort of get into the legalese of the agreements thing, but just to make sure everybody is comfortable with where we're at with the project.
Great. So thank you, Mr. Chisholm. We'll open the floor to questions. Just switch to our gallery view. Yes, Mr. Corneliuson.
Okay, actually it's pronounced Corneliuson, if you don't mind, or you can just refer to me as Adrian. That works as well too. It's an exciting program here and business case that you're presenting, and I'm really excited. I did take a tour of some of the facilities in London a few years ago, and I certainly think that the regeneration and the rehabilitation of some of these places is definitely required. I'm going to ask this question because I know my colleagues at County Council will ask me. Given that the city is investing $28 million to this process and this program, will the cost to the county increase based on that investment? And if so, what investment is being out of that 28 million or 40 million is being made in the county to improve services to our residents?
So for this project, none of the sites selected are located within the county portfolio. And I cannot speak to the funding arrangement between the City of London and Middlesex County. I'm not familiar with that enough to have a comment. I will say that one of the challenges on this project that a large number of providers have had is the energy conservation requirements and accessibility requirements are complicated to meet, and you can't put in your whole portfolio and actually meet the target set for CMHC. So we had to selectively add in and remove sites based on their energy use, their energy consumption, the viability of energy reduction projects. So it was complicated. The benefits, I think, that will come out of this to the county for me are one, in helping us as an organization better understand the accessibility standards we should be meeting and how we meet them for individual tenants and across our buildings. So the experience we gain through this will better inform how we invest in accessibility across all of our sites, whether they're participating in this focused project or not. We will set accessibility standards for units that will be used in future builds, but also if tenants have specific accessibility requirements, we'll be in a better position to offer them a unit or know what we need to do for their unit to bring it up to standard. So I think there's some indirect benefit in that way. And the other piece is the investment into the communities at this level of the 40 million through this program will free up funds that we otherwise would have spent on either on-demand, like capital and operating repairs, and let us put that into more planned capital projects across the entire portfolio. So we're conscious that there are a number of properties in London and within the county that are not identified in this project. And we're committed to making sure that we do work across the entire portfolio with the infrastructure money we received through this CMHC business case and the infrastructure gap business case to make sure we meet that needs. So, you know, the reality of some of the properties in the county is that they didn't have the mechanical systems that would give us the energy payback to let us put them into the program. And it would sort of take away from that. But it's not that we're not thinking of it. It's just this program is very specific. And we needed to make sure that we did not jeopardize receiving the forgivable loan portion of this by not meeting an energy or accessibility target across the portfolio.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Vizier, did you have a question?
I didn't know. I don't know how that thumb went up there, but no, I don't have any question. Thanks.
It was just
I got rid of
moral
it. I got rid of it
support.
somehow.
You were just giving us moral support.
Yeah, I apologize for being late. I was driving my son around.
Safety first, right? Are there other questions? So I would just like to say congratulations on this. Seems like the crescendo of what has been a lot of work and a pretty comprehensive program, as you've outlined. I also want to acknowledge that there's a tremendous amount of detail involved in this program, and given that you've been here for like 5 minutes, you've really dove deep into it. So thank you for that, and for making such a great presentation today.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, we have a number of consent items this evening. And so my ask to the board is, are there any of the reports that you would like pulled from the consent package for individual consideration? Mr. Morgan?
I'd like to discuss the vacancy management report separately.
Okay.
I wanted to discuss some things in that report as well.
Ms. Anderson?
Are we can still ask questions on them if they aren't pulled, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, then I don't need any pulled, thanks.
Mr. Morgan, just to clarify, did you want the report pulled or just to the ability to discuss it specifically?
I'm comfortable discussing it specifically, so I don't need it pulled as long as there's an opportunity to do so.
Sure. Okay, so seeing no request to pull any of the reports, Mr. Milson?
Through the chair, items H, I, and J, I'm not sure they're consent items. They're looking for approve of various different considerations. I wondered if they should be under a separate category. I could be wrong.
That's a very good point.
They're like items for direction, I think.
Speaking to the items separately, staff report J is an RFP award for roof evaluation, and it is normal routine RFP award business. So it is acceptable in some areas for consent agenda. I'm happy to pull it, but these are the types of agreements that sort of are considered routine business for us. So I'm happy to pull it out into reports of business as a practice, if that's what the board wants. We're sort of just sorting through the consent agenda format, because there's a couple of different options to do that. The same view is on the upgrade of the property management software. It is routine, just an enhancement to an existing contract. So happy to pull, take the direction from the chair, how I'd like to proceed on those.
Mr. Milson, you made an excellent point, and so I think it probably is appropriate to review the approval items separately. So in the consent package, then we will put together A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and I.
Yeah, and I didn't.
Well, you're looking for direction on I. Yes. So we'll, A through G will be in the consent package, and we will review individually items H, I, and J. Okay. And so having said that, and understanding that there's some interest in questions, let's get a motion on the floor to receive the consent items A through G. Mr. Milson, and a seconder? Mr. Bear. Okay. And so let's try and address the discussion in an orderly fashion. And so we'll maybe go through the reports individually. Are there points of discussion or questions regarding the CEO's report? Seeing none. Points of discussion regarding the board meeting schedule? None. And now around vacancy management. And Mr. Morgan, you had some questions or comments regarding vacancy management. The floor is yours.
Yes, I have a couple of questions for clarification and then maybe some comments after that. So in the report, we're tracking the vacancy management over time. And I want to understand like what is included in the numbers. So at the bottom of page 1 of the report, it talks about the total vacancy for October progress and lists the number of units, but that it is inclusive of units that are non-rentable or active restoration stock. So down below, we can see the number of units that are non-rentable or active restoration stock included in that. So if I want to know what the actual vacancy is, knowing that we're restoring units, is it just a function of backing those numbers out from the October numbers? I just want to understand how many actual vacant units we have that we aren't working on in some capacity.
Sure.
Can try. And then so I've been looking at this report as well. There are units pulled out that are not part of active restoration we have one that is part of the CMHC pilot unit to demo and develop an accessibility unit is one of the 2 units out of circulation that we sort of don't count as vacant and ready, because our intent is to modify the unit and work through there. The other unit that would fall into that category under property services was on hold to do some assessment to modify a series of units that had the same configuration, and that has been released since. So we had it on hold to do some assessment and get some quotes to do some work across a series of units. That's now been done. So the unit is released back in. So it's typically where there's a specific purpose that takes that out of circulation. The other units you do not see in the count that we are not actively working on are actually the re-rental units that are ready for re-rental, but the units are filtered partners. So those we track, but are not part of our vacancy because we don't manage the re-rental of the unit. It needs the partner to find a client, and that is managed through a different process than normal. Those are the two areas that we have units that are out of circulation and that don't count in the percentage. We do track them, we see them every month, we talk about them every month, but they're not in the stats.
So perhaps through the chair, I could ask this a slightly different way. We have a vacancy target of 3%, and we are likely, if I understand the process correctly, going to move into like a process of restoration for a large number of units over a period of time. And I want to understand how that restoration impacts these numbers and thus our ability to meet our target. And I think with such a large number of, with the CMHC funds, when they come into play, such a large amount of potential reconstruction of units, that we do not set ourselves up to look like we are lagging very far on our vacancy target because of work that we are well intending to do, which is of great benefit to the tenants and the shareholders and others. And I want to make sure that we have a metric in this report, this is a sensitive topic, particularly at the City of London. It is part of the reason that the board was dismissed in the past. And so I am very sensitive to ensuring that we provide a very clear, accurate assessment of where we stand with like what are actual vacancies, knowing that we are about to engage in a lot of restoration of units. So I think maybe we can format this or structure this in a better way. And I guess I want to understand, are we at risk of not meeting our target or even approaching our 3% target because of this? And if that's the case, and there's no intention of, do we want to articulate this in a different way because of the restoration activity that's going to happen? And I might be off base on some of this because I'm still working my way through as a new board member, understanding this report. But what my worry is that we're doing a very good thing and we're going to look bad in the process of not meeting our targets because of the way that this just might all unfold. And some very good work of turning over units quickly might get lost in the shuffle.
Can I add on to that? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, so Ms. Brooks, just before we get your question, I will share with Mr. Morgan that I understand from previous discussions that the units targeted for the CMHC restorations would be looked after as part of the regular vacancy process. And so we wouldn't be, and Mr. Renaud, perhaps you can chime in here if I'm incorrect, but we wouldn't be taking units out of circulation strictly for the purpose of renovating them. The work would be done as the units are vacated through the natural cycle of tenancy, and then when they were vacated, instead of just restoring them to the condition, they would then be upgraded and re-rented. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Great. However, your point is well made in that there will be a number of years now where this becomes a component of the restoration process. And so in the spirit of full transparency, we could perhaps ask for that to be documented somehow in this report.
I think you have made clear how my concern plays into this. And I totally agree with the way it's being accounted, but a full restoration of a unit is a longer process. Like what we're going to do with the CMHC funds is going to take much longer than what we would normally do to bring a unit up to speed, which means we're probably going to have more of a lag on this. And what we could be doing is setting ourselves up for doing a very good thing and looking very bad while we're doing it in the eyes of our shareholders. And so I think we need to rethink the way we want to measure our success and failure on the vacancies with, like, we've set a target of 3%, but if we're repairing units for longer periods of time because we're doing much more work to them, bringing them up to a much higher standard, all a very good thing, and we're going to be above that 3% for a much longer period of time, or higher above it because of the way that we do this, that is not a clear and transparent way that articulates the important work we're doing and the value of that work. It may open us up to needless criticism for something that is actually quite a good thing. So I think I'm comfortable kind of leaving this with staff to kind of consider the concerns that I have here, and thinking about the way that we can report on vacancies, given the context of the work that will be coming over a number of years, and ensure that we have the target in the right way, in the right spot for the right type of units that is achievable and meetable, and reasonable, because we are judged on our ability to meet our own target. And I want to make sure that it's a fair, clear target that can honestly be interpreted by the public and our shareholders.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Ms. Brooks?
Yes, if I can just add on to that about the transparency about this report. As a tenant member, I've been reading these reports since we've been getting them, and I've been rather confused about some of the documentation of the amount of days of a unit is sitting in active rental stock. It says for September, it was 32.3 days, and then for October, 36.9 days. So I understand that that's the active rental, but where I'm a little bit confused on, and I've been watching from a tenant perspective, and I've seen it, like where I'm seeing units sitting empty for 10 months before someone occupies it. So I guess my concern is, what does that look like to our shareholders, to other tenants, and to, other, prospective tenants, when we're seeing units that are sitting in our buildings that are empty for 10 months. And I know there's one right now, and there's been 3 in the last year that have been 10 months. And I'm speaking candidly because people are commenting on it. But I guess I'm confused of, so if it's 30 something days that they're in the active rental, how many other days are they sitting in the number 2 category of the non-rentable? How long are they sitting there? Because there's no days documented there for actually how long the unit's actually sitting there before it moves into active rental.
Ms. McKenzie?
Pardon me?
Yes. Would you care to comment while I'm saying?
I think the intention is always to get someone in the unit as quickly as possible. Oftentimes units are shown a number of times to prospective tenants and refused. So, there is never, in my understanding, in working with tenant services, that there is ever an intent to not have a unit return to active rental status immediately.
I don't think that's, I think.
So I think if we, through you, Madam Chair, I think if we look in the days that Ms. Brooks is looking for are available right after the chart under number 2, and you will see that at the end of October, it was 106 days that a unit was sitting in active restoration. So in this model, you would add the 106 days, and you'd have to have the re-rental period on top of that. So, and you'll note that that's a significant increase over the prior period, and we're working through that. But that is that days we're trying to be transparent on that. The anomaly for a unit being out for 10 months, I'm not seeing that in the data, so there may be some anomalies on somebody still having a tenancy right to that unit during that period, which sometimes happens. So I can't speak to that. I'm happy if, you want to reach out and ask about a specific unit or share that information, I will always look up. But I'm not seeing that in the data trail, but if there's a unit that you say that you can point me to, I'll always look to sort of see if, what is actually going on, to make sure there's nothing that is taking too long there. Because those are the things that are reputation issues. And if it sits empty for a protracted period of time, there's somebody who's not having affordable, safe housing that we want them to have. Does that work for you? Did you, that number is the answer you're looking for?
I did find it in the documents, and thank you for leaving that open, that I can come to you and ask you about specific questions or units. It's a little alarming to see that, it's gone from 65.2 days to 106 days. So I don't know if there's any background on that of why we had such an increase in a month.
So, I will share that I was on a call today with local housing corporations in Ontario, and the trend of increased turnover in 2021 compared to 2020, quite significant across all Ontario. I think with the pandemics sort of becoming less of an issue, less risky, people are moving or leaving their housing, or maybe it's the LTV is in a different place in their hearings, but the turnover across the stock is quite high. And every provider reporting an increase quarter over quarter this year in the average time it takes to turn a unit. And it's a little bit on the supply chain. If you're missing something to turn a unit, get it fully done, and the availability of vendors. And I think this one is one of those complex issues because it's a little bit about how many units turn over, the number of staff we have available to work on them, the effectiveness of our business process, and then when our reliance is on supply chain for whether it's closet doors or appliances and or vendors to do the work. We are noticing across the sector that we're getting slowdowns for those reasons. So the intent is to continue to push at this and come back in 2022 with improved reporting, because I have some of the same questions that you have as the board, as I sort of, this is the second one I've seen. And I think I would like to see a little more information on this issue. And the intent was for the CMHC units to make sure that they have targets for how long the turnover takes and making sure they're reported. So there's some transparency in those units. And of the units that are not part of that program that we consistently push on the targets for those as well. I share the mindset, and I commit to in 2022 coming back with a report on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. Perhaps the ask of the board could be for, as Mr. Morgan suggested, as a leadership team, staff consider how the reporting could be more transparent. Perhaps a timeline of events from vacancy to occupancy, so that we could better understand what's happening. And that it's a complex process, that it's not just move out, wash the floors, move in. And then we could better understand where those pieces of time are being used and support staff in their efforts to move through that more efficiently.
If I, through the chair, could add a piece to that. And I think some communication with our shareholders at the appropriate point in time to say, you might see units take longer once they go out of active rentals, because we're working through the CMHC process and we're bringing them up to a much better and higher standard for all the good things that were in the presentation before. And that it's very clear how many units are in that. See, that is a good news story. Whereas previous, a rental unit taking a long time to be fixed was not a great story, right? So it's not that, transparent is often sounds like a bad word. In this case, it's communicating like a very good thing that can be misinterpreted easily if it's not clear.
Agreed. Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. Through you, maybe to staff for additional information. I'm wondering if we can hear about September and October with respect to vacancy trends, because they both were significantly higher than any other month, at least on this chart. So I'm wondering if those were particular events or if we're concerned about trends.
Mr. Chisholm?
I am concerned about trends because yes, it is trending up. I don't think there's any specific events, but I will sort of point to what I just sort of mentioned about the increasing in turnovers that we've been having, and sort of that I think we had been able to manage vacancies down with lower volume, and now that the volume increased, we're struggling with that. We have had staffing issues in the key role we use to turn units over, and we've got competition that's about to go out to fill those jobs with some absences that has had impacted. So the unit make ready is part of a workload that also does on-demand calls. So if the tenant calls increase, the amount of capacity to do unit make readies is an issue. So we get reduced staffing in that position. It's an issue. So we have an active plan to address that, but it's going to take until early 2022 to fix that up. So I think I'm pointing to an increase in vacancies and a reduction in staff available to manage that piece of work. And then we are looking at other options, like how to leverage vendors differently, but that is a problematic issue in our current environment where the vendors we have can't scale up because they can't get staff, and new vendors are at capacity, or newer vendors are at capacity and not interested in taking on new customers. We're just trying to sort through all of that, and I am worried with the trend, but with the new staff that they come and play in January, we expect to be able to stay on top of that.
Are there additional questions regarding the vacancy report? Mr. Milson?
Through the chair, this is more just a comment. I'm just really happy to see some of those that section that talked about property service process improvements. Those the first two for sure are very positive, and I think that might help get before the unit is vacated, that they have a pre-move out inspection, and then we get to get that information prior to them leaving. So I think those, specifically the first two ones, well, and the staff that was just spoken about, I think all three of those are great. You know, on a positive side, would be great to hopefully see that trend, you know, make its way down, or help it anyways. So that's all I wanted to say, was just a quick comment.
Are there questions or comments regarding the tenant advisory committee briefing? Seeing none. Questions or comments regarding the Reimagine Southdale update? This was the one we had requested last month. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. Through you to staff, I wanted to ask about the timeline on page 27. I noticed that there's an extensive communication plan with tenants. I'm not sure what the nature of the zoning bylaw amendment is, but I'm wondering if there's any concern that there's no appeal period built into this, or any timelines that might be associated with the zoning appeal, and if there are steps being taken to mitigate that risk, communications with external parties, or if there's any indication of problems, I guess, in that zoning bylaw amendment process.
Yeah, Ms. Anderson was asking about the timeline. Yeah.
to the communication plan.
Yeah. And specifically about the zoning bylaw amendment. Does not include in a window for appeals.
Correct.
And if there was any mitigation strategies in the schedule to accommodate that.
I'm not sure there's any mitigation strategies per se to accommodate that. You know, a lot of what we're gonna see with the project, whether it's the work schedule or the communication plan, is really to a degree somewhat fluid. You know, we will deal with issues as they arise. And, you know, we're made aware of a couple more questions this week that we will have to address in conjunction with the architects. So, you know, as these things arise, we will deal with them and work towards staying on the schedule for the start of the construction period.
Okay, maybe just to follow up then, how critical is that construction start date? Are there implications if it gets bumped back?
Well, I think, you know, in terms of implications if it gets bumped back, you know, it's the first phase is, the second phase is contingent on the completion of the first phase. So really in terms of how the money flows and how the project flows, we have a delay on phase one, we'll have a delay that pushes phase two back. But beyond that, you know, there's no significant impact other than when the project will start. You know, we're looking at an August start, which is what we're hoping for. If it's then pushed back to put us into the middle of winter, that again is going to push us out towards fall and spring. So it may compound depending on the impact and delay.
What's the nature of the zoning bylaw amendment? Is it tweaks to existing zoning or is it substantial?
No, it's primarily zoning, and we don't anticipate it being a big issue. I mean, our understanding is that it's pretty well in hand in dealing with our architects and their conversation with the city.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Are there other questions regarding the Reimagine Southdale update? Or comments? None? And from the board, are there questions or comments regarding the key performance indicators report? Seeing none. And any questions from the board or comments regarding the Q3 financial update? Seeing none. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. So seeing no further questions or comments, we'll call the vote. The vote to accept the consent items A through G. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion is passed. Thank you. And now we'll deal with items H, I, and J separately. So we'll just take a moment to find those in my package. Okay, the staff report 57 deals with upgrade to property service management software. And so I will ask, is there a brief overview that you would like to provide to the board in regards to the report?
So I think for context, just to provide an update, one of you, Middlesex Community Housing has used a product from Yardi to manage our tenants, our buildings, and our finances for at least 10 years. We found ourselves aging out in an old software in 2016 and upgraded to a shared version of Yardi, which provided the basic functionalities of what we need to run our business, but it was very limited in terms of transformation and leveraging it to transform the business. We are recommending and we're to move to an enhanced version of the Yardi product that will give us access to more features, functionality, and the ability to improve our work process and workflows within the system and enhance our reporting to better manage and transform our business. So it's taking an existing tool that staff are familiar with and using it to do more work for us and streamline our business. Doing this, we also have the opportunity to invest separately in a new module to manage our capital projects, including the CMHC program, that will enhance our reporting and tracking of both expenses and progress on key deliverables, so that we can also streamline the reporting and ensure we stay on top of those budget dollars and project timelines. So we are requesting approval of the board to enter into that. And with these changes, the combined operating impact is about $40,000 in increased license costs. There's also a one-time implementation transition cost of just under $100,000. That cost had previously been approved by former board chair Phil Squires through a briefing note process, and we thought it prudent to bring back to the board because we'll be updating on this to get the full board approval before we move this project. If we move forward with this, we will initiate this project before the end of the year to get ahead of some other clients so that we can have an implementation by the end of Q2 2022.
Thank you. Mr. Chisholm. I'll ask for a motion then to approve the following recommendations: to approve LMCH to enter into the software agreement with Yardi, to enter an agreement with Yardi for the transition services, and to authorize staff to take the necessary actions. I'll ask for that motion now. Mr. Bizaire, and a seconder. Ms. Anderson, thank you. And is there any questions or discussion on this item? I see none. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion is passed. Thank you. Okay, the next item is the tenant director resignation. And Mr. Chisholm, you provided a recommendation that the board receive a formal resignation of Ms. Mano and authorize staff to prepare the letter of acknowledgement for Ms. Mano, and then authorize staff to take the necessary actions to inform the city clerk and to initiate the process of replacement. And so I'll ask for a motion to approve these recommendations. Mr. Bizaire, yeah, and a seconder?
Sure.
Mr. Cornelison, thank you. And is there discussion on this item? Yes, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Through you to staff, I'm wondering what the plan is for the counselor vacancy.
Is there anybody on the board that has some insight they'd like to share?
Councillor Morgan, would you care to comment on that?
Yes, I would. So I can tell you that all of council has been circulated a document asking for their interest in the reshuffling of our own standing committees, as well as interest in being appointed for existing vacancies caused by our two colleagues who essentially vacated their seats, and we've now replaced them. So all new colleagues have been able to give their feedback. It was due today. It will go to the next SPPC meeting, at which point what we will have is the members of council who are interested in serving on this board, and then we will make a selection at that point. So it should be dealt with at the next SPPC meeting, of which I could probably find the date of, I think it's the 30th of November is when it will land. So don't quote me on the date, but I believe that's the next SPPC where we would be able to approve a nominee, have it approved by council the following week, and then have a new board member.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments regarding our director's resignation? No. So all of those in favor of approving the recommendations as stated in the report? Are there any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is passed. And our final report for approval this evening is the staff report on the RFP for roof evaluation. And let me just find it. The recommendations are to approve the award of the work and to authorize staff to effectively move the work forward. And so I'll ask for a motion to approve the recommendations in the report.
Yeah, I'll do it, sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Corneliuson, and the seconder, Mr. Bizaire. Are there questions or comments regarding this recommendation? See none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the recommendation? Are there any opposed? See none, the motion is passed. Thank you. Okay, so at this point in the meeting, we'll be moving into camera to receive some client privileged advice from our solicitor in regards to a report that we've received. And so we'll just give a moment here to, with our live stream. And perhaps, Mr. Morgan, are you able to make a general comment to the progress made?
Yeah, I'm happy to report progress on the matter for which we went into camera for.
Thank you. The final agenda item this evening then is staff report number 60, a request for approval from Mr. Chisholm. The recommendations are then to authorize LMCH to participate in the CMHC co-investment fund, to approve the agreement, to approve the operating agreement, to approve the account security agreement, to approve the resolution of the board, and to authorize the board to execute the agreements, to authorize the board chair to sign the agreements, and to authorize board members to make the necessary actions to give effect to the above recommendations. Could I get a motion to approve the recommendations? Mr. Milson, thank you. A seconder? Ms. Brooks, thank you. And we'll ask for discussion on the recommendations or comments. Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, just a question for our staff team. The agreements before us have a number of milestones to meet in them as per the agreements. Just do you see any concern with us being able to meet those milestones? And I'll have some comments on the general motion after I get the answer to that question.
Thank you. Mr. Chisholm?
Through the chair, we're conscious that they're ambitious milestones, but we're confident that we will meet them. We do have some rigorous reporting through CMHC that will help us make sure we're managing and monitoring those. And we do have sufficient time in the project plan should we run into any issues on meeting any specific milestones. We have time to do a contingency and catch up. So we are confident that we're able to meet these objectives. We've done an energy audit assessment to confirm the numbers that staff came up with. So we're confident that the objectives will be met.
Thank you for the answer to that. And so, comment on the motion. I'm very supportive of this approach. I think obviously there, in this agreement and a comprehensive agreement, there are, there's work to do and milestones to meet. And I think our staff have a good plan. I'm very comfortable with the comments by the CEO. And I also think this is a great partnership between CMHC, our shareholder, and our organization to get access to a substantial amount of non-repayable money, $15.5 million forgivable loan from CMHC to engage in a process the end result will be an enhanced organization, an enhanced quality of life for the tenants we serve, and a level of efficiency on the energy side of things that is going to pay us and our tenants dividends for years to come through the savings of the upgrades. And of course, from an accessibility standpoint, put us in a position to be a more accessible and a modernized accessibility within our housing stock, to be able to have the opportunity to address over 2,000 units through this, I think is a significant milestone in the history of this organization. Probably paralleled with the original mass construction of some of these buildings. So I think the moment that we are at the start of a process, it should not be lost on us that this is a very significant transition point, I think, for both the stock that we're responsible for, as well as the tenants that we serve. And I'm certainly supportive of this. I like the CEO said, it's ambitious. There's going to be lots of challenging work to do, but I have every confidence in our staff team that we will be able to meet those challenges and with our other partners achieve the goals that the signing of these documents and the signing of these agreements are just the start of. So I'll look forward to the work ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan, for your thoughtful comments. Other comments from the board or questions? No. So I will second Mr. Morgan's comments in that we cannot overstate the importance of the deal. This will be a paradigm shift for the organization. It's a very exciting time to be part of this group. There's a lot of good work to be done here for Londoners, and it's pretty exciting. So thank you for your efforts to date, and we wish all the best to the efforts coming ahead of us. And of course, as a board, we are here to support staff's efforts and make sure that we're able to fulfill the commitments of the agreements. So, seeing no other comments, all those in favor of the recommendation stated in board report number 60? Are there any opposed? The motion is passed. Congratulations. Very nicely done, yes. Since there were no new business items raised at the beginning of the agenda or further inquiries, one last call for new business items. Seeing none, we'll ask for a motion to adjourn our meeting. Mr. Bizaire, and seconded by Mr. Milson. And is everyone in favor of adjourning? Motion is passed. Thank you, everybody, for your time tonight. Have a good evening.
Before
Thanks, everyone.
Before you drop off, you'll be getting an email. One of the motions you approved was to sign off on a resolution of the board. So I'll be sending those individually through email. If you could sign and return those back to myself and Selene over the next 2 days, that would be very much appreciated. That way we get our documentation into CMHC. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good evening.